Okay, any questions? Justin, he's got a whole unicorn sticker out underneath his book. Okay. We also get some depositional features that tell us that glaciers have been through an area. When glaciers move, they pick up all kinds of things off the ground, rocks and sand and boulders, and they will drag that material across the ground. That creates more material that gets incorporated into the ice. You also have debris falling on top of the glacier, especially with valley glaciers. If they're scraping by the mountainside, they're clawing away at the rock there. Pieces break off and fall off, and they fall into and onto the glacier. So glaciers will frequently have sediment incorporated not only along the bottom, but along the sides, the top, and throughout. When the ice melts, all of that material either gets dumped directly to the ground as the ice melts, or the material gets rinsed out of the ice by the meltwater. But because glaciers can carry such enormous quantities of material, they can leave behind enormous quantities of deposited sediment. And they can make various features. We have moraines, outwash, can't forget outwash. Let's see, what else? Moraine contains outwash. Drumlins, loess. Let's talk about loess. Oh, erratics. An erratic is a stone that is in error. It's a stone that's located in a place where it doesn't belong. It's a stranger. Around here, erratics are mostly big, huge boulders of granite or metamorphic gneiss picked up by the glaciers in Canada and dragged here and dumped when they melted. We don't have rocks like that here. We're sitting on, a mile and a half of limestone and shale. If you want granite in Dayton, you've got to go down almost 3.5 miles to pre-Cambrian basement. So to have a big granite boulder sitting on top of the surface, that came from the glaciers. That's an erratic. They usually end up as landscaping stones, monument stones, because being granite, being igneous rock or metamorphic rock, they're very dense and very heavy. And they can weigh several tens to several hundreds of tons, so they don't get moved very far. Is that canes or canes? Canes. Do I got a story about that later? K-A-M-E. Then we have moraines. A moraine is a ridge of sediment. They can be, a few tens of feet high. They can be a couple hundred feet high. They'll form a lot, especially along the front and along the sides of the glacier. This represents material that's kind of bulldozed or pushed out in front of the glacier as it moves forward. It can also be built up from sediment being deposited by meltwater coming over the top of the glacier. Moving this way. Now, in a continental glacier, by definition, it's a huge sheet of ice that's expanding downward into lower elevation. You're getting lower elevation, you're getting way away from the poles, conditions are warmer, at least twice a year, at least, seasonally. And that's going to cause a lot of melting at the front of the glacier. You will get streams and rivers of meltwater flowing across the top along the bottom of the glacier as well. And that will rinse out a lot of your sand and silt and debris and sediment that was frozen in the ice. The front of that glacier can be several hundred feet tall. So you can get waterfalls that come down off the top of the glacier, and when they hit the ground below, they'll dump all their sediment. It's very similar to the formation of an alluvial fan. And you get these huge cone-shaped piles of sediment. Very similar to an alluvial fan. That's called a kame, K-A-M-E. You get dozens of these all along the front of the glacier, and they can get big enough that they'll blend together, they'll merge into each other, and together they form a moraine. Now, moraines and kames are made of sediment. They're mostly pebbles and sand. We use that. We mine that to make this with it. Concrete, cement, asphalt. We have a town just south of here, and we call it the city of what?
Moraine.
Moraine. The actual moraine that the city's built near, most of it doesn't exist anymore because it was mined for the sand and gravel to make the cement, asphalt, and concrete to build the city with. So that's where that comes from. Outwash is sediment that gets deposited, again, by the meltwater. The streams flow down both underneath the glacier, across the top of the glacier, out in the middle of the glacier as it's melting. You'll get the deposition of kames. Water flows down the kame, down the moraine, rinses more sediment out. And out in front of the glacier, seasonally, especially in the summertime, you'll get these streams, these big braided streams, that'll come in here and deposit all kinds of sediment. And that will deposit your outwash. Outwash is sediment washed out of the melting ice. And that gets distributed all out in front, big sheets all out in front of the glacier. That long, boring drive on 70 from here to Columbus, where it gets really, really flat, that's outwash. That's outwash. When you're driving along and you're looking left and you're looking right, and all you see is like flat, and a mile away a farm, and a mile from that full of cow, and a mile from that tree, there's nothing. You know, when you look out there, don't think of boring flat farmland and a tree. Think 500 foot tall wall of ice. That's how it was. That's why it's flat. That's outwash. We mine that too. You ever been east on 35 into towards Xenia? Do it sometime. You got nothing else better to do. You have a full tank of gas and it's cheap. You know, when you're on East 35 going to Xenia, you get to a point where you have to start having all those car dealerships and all the stupid signal lights. Yep. Only in America do we expect you to go 70 and then stop, and 70 and then stop. Okay. And when you're going east, past all those car dealerships and everything, you look on the horizon, you have like a low hill, it's all green, covered in grass and stuff and trees. That's a moraine. That's a moraine there. And you start getting way past all the car dealerships, and on the left, there's like a big Phillips construction, big Phillips sand and gravel quarry. Okay? That's why they're there. They're mining the caves, they're mining the moraine, and they're mining the outwash. These glacial deposits make the state of Ohio, I think, 5th or 6th in the nation for the production of sand and gravel aggregates. They should feel proud. It's good to be a Buckeye. Issues. Sand. Yeah. We'd like to use sand rather than salt, but it clogs all your drain sewers. So that's an extra expense, and then you have to dig it out. You can't manage. Just give everybody studs. Set far some standard with studs. I lived across the alleyway from an old woman that had studs on her Nova. She never took them off. So, you could see in the alleyway where she backed out of the garage because it spun the grooves into the pavement. Yeah. Oh well, back in the day. Let's see, drumlins and loose drumlins. Drumlins are features, they're kind of elongated, shaped kind of like this, and they can tell you what direction the ice moved in. They're these little low, kind of cigar-shaped hills. And what they are, they used to be part of a moraine formed by a glacier. But then after that glacier melted and left, a second glacier came through the same area, plowed through that older moraine and reshaped it. And what's left is a drumlin. Drumlins, they are we got a lot of moraines, especially up to Wisconsin. You think it's flat here to Columbus. Wisconsin, the Dakotas, Illinois. You drive through Illinois, no soft music channel. There's nothing. Now, that flattened topography, again, it's an erosional feature of the glaciers. It's just going to scrape that right down to nothing. Good grief. They scraped Canada down to bedrock. The oldest rocks of the continent that were formed billions of years ago, that make up the foundation of the continents. We geologists refer to those rocks as basement. That's that's the foundation of your house, is the basement, right? So if you have been scraped down to the basement rocks, what's happened to the house? A lot of the house is gone. That's all you have left. And that's what these glaciers during the last ice age did to eastern and central Canada. All of the thicknesses of rock that used to be on top of those ancient rocks is all scraped, ground up and scraped away. Dragged here and dumped. That's what glaciers do. You're sitting on about anywhere from 800 to 1,200 feet thick of glacial sediment dumped here in the valley when the glaciers melted. Now that's awesome for us today because that provides a source of water. That's something we'll get to a little later. But it also gives us something else, and that's loess. Loess. That's a good word, loess. It's a weird word. It's German, but it's a good word, loess. It's just one of those words, like if someone's bothering you, you just say, oh, it's just loess. And then just walk away. What does she have? What does she have? Is that contagious? Is that close to that? What? She's got loess. She's got loess. I don't know. Look out. Loess is rock flour. Where are my bakers here? A few bakers, folks. You've seen flour. Very, very tight. If you don't, if that dump, it's everywhere. You can, grist mills have been blown up from the ignition of flour powder. It's that fine, that powder. Rock flour. How do you get rock flour? Well, you have rocks that get picked up off the ground by the moving ice, and they get stuck into the ice. And they get dragged along the ground. Now, these glaciers can be miles thick. If you've ever shoveled snow, or shoveled wet snow, or shoveled snow with ice, it's heavy. Imagine this material 2.5, 3 miles thick. And you're a rock at the bottom of it being dragged across the ground. And you're going to get smushed. It's a tremendous amount of force there. And this is what you did. Not pleasant looking. Look!
I'm not getting sleep that night.
Yeah, there you go. Lots of it. Lots of it, lots of it, lots of it, lots of it. What's in this rock? What's in this rock? What are rocks made of? Minerals. What are minerals made out of? Elements. What's in your Flintstones that you chew every morning? Huh? Minerals. Iron, magnesium, zinc, copper, calcium, sodium, potassium. It's in here. That's a powdered vitamin supplement. Right there on the table. Now, I mean, you could eat it, or snort it, or whatever you want to get powder off the table. I don't care. It's not going to hurt you. I wouldn't advise it. But you take that instead, and you bring it home, and you put it in your potted plant, and that plant is going to uproot itself at 3 o'clock in the morning and come into your bed and wake you up and say, thanks. And you're going to come screaming, I want to live! Yeah. That stuff, that mousse, is powdered vitamin supplement for vegetation. Being in a powdered form makes all of the potassium, the sodium, the iron, the nitrogen, the everything that was in here a lot more easily available and a lot more easily extractable by plants. You add that stuff into soil, ooh, amazing stuff. Amazing. It's like soil cocaine, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's really high quality. It's really good stuff. And, you know, these glaciers during the last ice age, they scraped Canada bare. Took them down to the slab, okay, basically. Ground that all up. Dragged it here into the Midwestern United States and dumped it. Throughout the Midwestern and Eastern Midwestern states, we have piles of that stuff. Piles of it, all through the Mississippi River Valley, all through the Central Plains, all throughout Central and Southwestern Ohio, Kentucky. It's one of the reasons why we have in this country one of the most productive agricultural belts in the world. It's from the Lewis. I thank glaciers for that. Any questions?
Let me get your definition for moraine.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the definition.
It's usually a low ridge of sediment. They're usually maybe quarter mile wide and usually less than 100 feet, maybe a couple feet high. And it's just a low ridge that typically will mark the front where the front of the glacier was. Any other questions? I have a lame pain story. You want to hear it?
Sure.
Well, if you've never been, you got to go. It's awesome. The Natural History Museum down in Cincinnati. That's the one off of 75. You know, it's in the old train station, and that kind of half circle thing. That's awesome. And they have there a glacier exhibit that you can walk through, and if you can experience what it's like, what it would have been like to have been here in the ice age. They have actual noises of what with the glacier noise and all that. They have a contraption with a rock And another rock that you can move to make your own rock flower. This stream cable is awesome. And it's right, when you come out, it's right next to the bat cave, which is another thing you have to do. It's awesome. But when this thing first opened, a while ago, when I was in graduate school, a bunch of us got tickets to see it. So we went down to see it. So we're walking through. Oh, cool. This is neat. And at the end, when you come out, they painted the walls and everything to make it look like perspective. You know, that trompe art where you can look in the distance. Oh, this is like really cool. And they had these tour guides, helping people through answering questions and whatnot. They had different features and animals and stuff that you about it. And this girl, she must have been, 15, 16 years old, giving the tour. And she's talking about these features. We're trying to be polite. And she says, this feature over here, she says, it's called, it's this, it's that, she says, it's called a cane. And a friend of mine, Matt, a little soft-spoken, little sweet guy, he goes, I'm sorry, I think you mean cane. And she's like, no, sir, it's a cane. Now, he's too sweet to, he's like, oh, nothing. Me? Really? Okay, she's like, I don't think so, honey. Like, Matt, you may not say that for yourself, but I will. I'm sorry, so you're a geologist? That's a cane. With an M. Just remember it for next time. Oh, I'm sorry. Cane. What that is? Hey, woman. Pipsqueak. It's my friend. Get her the what for? She's, you gotta understand, she's probably, she's, 30-some years old now, doing what? Oh, I remember this one time, I was telling her kids, I was just a tour guide, and this chick with me, I just can't. You gotta remember that, when you have one of those stories, you to tell somebody, you gotta remember, the person you're telling about, they're part of their story. This little yeah, here's someone else's story.
So if I go back there and someone says that, I should probably correct them.
Yeah. That is a cane.
Several years ago.
Have you tried this before? I've tried this before, yeah. That would be fun. And it's awesome. If you got nothing to do some weekend and you bored out of your skull, rainy days, it's awesome. It's really a cool trip. Alrighty then. So those are some depositional features of glaciers. Glaciers do a lot of other beneficial things for us. Of course, it takes them millions of years to do it, but it's really worth it in the end. They carve all of these beautiful features through mountains and valleys that today are aesthetically pleasing. They give mountain climbers something to do. It gives us all of this rich, fertile soil with all of the woods. It gives us huge, vast economic resources from the mining of all the sediment, sand, and gravel. And in many cases, that sediment, that sand and gravel, acts as underground water storage. It's storage for groundwater. You're sitting on it right now, it's very special. You're sitting on one of the world's biggest buried valley glacial aquifers. It currently supplies almost 4 million people with drinking water for not only municipal use, but also for industry and agriculture. And it is one of the best quality water in the nation. Dayton water, good old Dayton, nothing like good old Dayton water.
Where's it come from?
Where does it come from? I mean, where's the water itself come from?
Yeah.
From what it did last night and this morning.
Obviously,
Yeah, mostly from rainfall, snow melt, and coming in through streams and rivers, it soaks in through the bottom. And if you on the ground, it's okay. Water's water. When you have the drink, you dump some out for the homies, right? That groundwater. That's why if you're drinking like a bottle of something, and if you get to the end, I don't want any more of that. Put the liquid on the ground or down the sink. Don't put bottled water in the landfill. We need to go back to the aquifer. We don't need to throw away water. We need it. But yeah.
It's something for some alcohol use the water content here is too good.
Yeah. It doesn't impart enough taste. According to many studies, we have a lot of dissolved calcium in our groundwater because it goes to limestone. And that's actually good for your ticker. It's good for your heart. It reduces your risk of heart disease. So if you drink more Dayton water and fewer mind-cell potato chips, it will be some of the healthiest people in the country. And I saw a news blurb, saw a news blurb last night, I don't know if you caught it. They have a new study out apparently that people who eat really healthy, they can actually eat too healthy. And it's bad for them. I'm just going to have another donut. Yeah. Do they now? Yeah? Oh, well, I didn't know that. Carolyn Park. Yeah. Oh my gosh, she's even got a brochure. Wait, like work there or something? Oh, cool. Oh, well then, forget, yeah, it's from Carolyn Park. Apparently, there's a glacial exhibit there too. Glacial slide?
I heard actually cry.
Ooh, that's not fun. Well, okay, start with Carolyn Park. I think it goes. Okay. So they have a lot of benefits from glaciers. Glaciers give us estuaries, and glaciers gave us the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes were a system of rivers before the ice came. When the ice came in out of Canada, it blasted through those river valleys and dug them out, and now we have lakes. That's the power of ice. Ice is why the Ohio River exists. It's why the Mississippi River flows the way it does. Because when the ice came through, rivers had to change course because they couldn't flow under the ice. So it rerouted the Miami, the Ohio, the Scioto. You look at the rivers here coming in out of the Rockies. And look, it's like, okay, here's this river trucking out of Montana. It gets here and it almost makes like a 90-degree angle. And it flows this way. Okay. This one's coming along. Stop, 90-degree angle this way. Why? There was ice there. They had to go around to go under it.
Hey, yeah.
Not ice. Hey, what?
Is it true that if you go to John Bryan Park, you're down walking the trail, and there's a huge, big rock comes up and big, I don't know, 820 feet up, whatever. I was told that was where the glaciers came through and cut through that rock like it was butter. That was one of the spots that came through here. Sure or not?
Wow!
Not sure.
No. No. That's not from ice. That's from the meltwater. The meltwater draining off the glacier.
Yeah.
Yeah, carbon. But no, if the glacier went through there, it'd be a lot bigger.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's meltwater. Any other questions? I had a student that came back from Hawaii. And she said, yeah, it's our tour guide, Volcano National Park, said it was from subduction. I said, did you beat her? I should have. Yeah, you should have. Hot spot. Not subduction in Hawaii. Hot spot. Okay. Don't kid me. I'm not kidding. Central family has a great vacation with you. They don't even go to the movies with me anymore. At the time the movie's like, oh man. My sister, I have three sisters, and one of my sisters, her husband's a marine biologist, and we were watching, the four of us went out to see Tarzan, Disney cartoon Tarzan, and my two sisters were sitting next to each other, and they had a scene where the elephants are in the water, and he's talking about piranha and all these little fish in the water, and she goes, that's a striped something. They're only found in the Amazon rainforest basin. Like, and those are lemurs. They're only in Madagascar. They couldn't do that. And my other two sisters on either end are like, shut up! It's a cartoon! Yeah. It's hard to see somebody go to the movies with it. I don't know. So, glaciers are going to move because of gravity. They're huge. Gravity's going to grab it and move it downhill. They're a form of mass wasting. What what keeps them moving? New snow and melting. If you get more snow piling up in the back, this is going to be in your cirque. And then you're getting way, way up high elevation, high latitude, high up in the mountains. You get more snow piling up there than what is melting at the front. Then you have what's called the glacial advance. Then we get bigger and bigger and bigger and thicker and thicker and spread out more and flow farther and farther downhill. They advance, they move forward across the landscape. If the opposite happens, if melting at the front is a lot more aggressive than the amount of snow that's piling up at the other end, then there's not enough new snow coming in to keep up. And the glacier will start to shrink. It will start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. It will melt back. And that's a glacial retreat. Melting will dominate, and the glacier will go back. It will melt back, it will get smaller and smaller, it will retreat back up into the higher elevations. Throughout an ice age, which can last several hundreds of thousands of years to several millions of years, throughout that ice-dominated time, there will be multiple cycles of advance and retreat, and advance and retreat. You get little changes in climate, little variations in the climate during that long term that will cause these, it goes and it comes back, and it goes away, it comes back, and it goes away, and it comes back. So these glaciers move and come down across the landscape in these little pulses. Sometimes they go farther, sometimes not as far. Eventually, climate changes back to a warming trend, and retreat kicks in earnest, and they keep retreating until they're gone. Well, that keeps them big enough to be moving. What actually caused them to move in the first place? Two things. Plastic flow and basal slip. Okay, where are my favorites? You made bread, you made pizza dough. Have you had any experience with pizza dough? Making rolls, making biscuits? You get that stuff, cookie dough. You get the dough, you put it on the table, and what's it going to start to do?
Right.
It's going to start to spread out under its own weight. That's plastic flow. Your book gives the example, I think, of warm cheese. Don't even let us talk about cheese. Yeah, there's something growing in it. Well, there is something growing in it anyway, why it's cheese. But plastic flow, that glacier is so friggin' heavy that it actually smooshes under its own weight. It's just so heavy, it moves under its own weight. That's plastic flow. The plastic flow will cause the ice to crack and break because it stretches across the top as it's moving. And along the bottom, it's stuck. Along the bottom, there's friction with the ground, and there are places where it's frozen to the ground. So there's a lot of friction here. Okay. So that's going to be kind of slow across the bottom. But across the top, you don't have the friction. So you're going to have faster here because it's building up. When you go further back, like the beer belt, you go further back up here into the mountains where that glacier has its start. And as more snow piles up here, the weight of it is pushing down and it's pushing the whole thing forward. Like a conveyor belt. Building up here is pushing it forward. Well, this is moving fast. The top is moving faster than the bottom, so it's pulling the top across the bottom so it cracks and breaks. These are crevasses. That's a crevasse, which is French, and it's a really deep crack. They open and close. They can be several tens to several hundreds of feet deep. You don't want to fall into one of those. No, you may or may not ever come out again. We can measure how fast glaciers move. If you do it with time-lapse photography, we can actually put sensors inside the glacier, and that can monitor how far it's moving every year, every month, every week, every day. With an increase in average global temperatures, current climate change, we've been noticing that glaciers are moving faster, and they're in retreat. They're melting a lot faster as well. Another thing that's keeping them moving is something called basal slip. Basal slips from meltwater. Meltwater. The weight of the ice and some of that friction is enough to warm parts of the ice up enough that it melts. And areas where you get meltwater underneath the glacier, that liquid water can act kind of as a lubricant. It can help loosen up the bottom of the ice, maybe even float it a little bit, separate it off the ground, thaw it from the ground, and that facilitates the motion, makes it a little easier for it to slide. Any questions? Modern glaciers today, many of them are moving at several feet per year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. During an ice age, they can move on average a few inches a year to maybe tens of feet a year. Depends on how fast that new snow is piling up at the end or how fast it's melting at the front. And it changes throughout the entire lifespan of the glacier.
Do we have any idea how long until the next ice age?
It's kind of weird. We know that Milankovitch cycles occur with regularity, and according to that cycle, that theory, every time that cycles around again, we should get another ice age, but we don't. And there are so many factors that are connected to climate change, which is what drives glacier development. There's so many factors involved in that. The Earth has been through at least a dozen major episodes of glaciation in its history. This ice age that ended about 10,000 years ago is the most recent. But they all have, or seem to have, very distinctive causes, very distinctive contributory causes that led to their development. How long until the next one? Don't know. Don't really know. With current climate change and current warming, it could be easily hundreds of thousands of years from now, if not longer. It depends. If we see climate change that causes sudden melting of Greenland or Antarctica, which we're starting to see hints of now, that could interfere greatly with ocean circulation and could potentially flip us into another cooling rather than warming. You could have another supervolcanic eruption out of Indonesia that would crash the system, if you wish, if you want to put it that way, and would definitely trigger significant global cooling. But whether it would be long-term enough to start an ice age, probably not.
So I don't need to worry about myself with it.
Yeah, sort of. Well, the thing is, even if we were like starting on now, it would still be several hundred years before they were able to pick up all of the Americas and bring it here. It's still, you'd still miss it. Any questions? The melting, the seasonal melting of mountain glaciers return huge amounts of water to other vital parts of the hydrologic cycle through many parts of the world. The Nile, that comes through Egypt and northeastern Africa. Most of the water in the Nile comes from the melting of glacial ice on Mount Kilimanjaro and other mountains in the East African Rift System. The waters that feed Bangladesh and India and a large part of Southeast Asia, the Brahmaputra, the Ganges, the Indus River, they come mostly from snow and ice melt from the mountains of the Himalayas. We ourselves have many rivers, major rivers, that come out of the Rocky Mountains to help bring water down to the Central Plains in the western states, and they get a large part of their water from the melting of snow and ice in the Rockies. So these glaciers do play a huge contributory role in providing water to other parts of the hydrologic cycle. Now we've got one more vital part of that cycle to consider yet, and that's water we can't even see. Let's see, we did streams, we did ocean coast, we did glaciers, frozen water, and one last, that's groundwater. Now sometimes you'll see the word groundwater as one word, and sometimes you will see it as two words. It doesn't matter. We scientists use both ways and really haven't come to an agreement on whether it should be one word or two. Groundwater is water in the ground, below the surface. Now, where underground? Big, huge, flowing rivers of water underground? No. No. Occasionally, rarely, under very special circumstances and for limited areas, yes. But 95% of the time, no. You may often hear it referred to as, oh, it's an underground river here, it's an underground stream. It is flowing underground, it is moving underground. All water wants to get downhill. It doesn't really matter if it's on the surface or underground. It's all gravity driven, it wants to come downhill. So it is moving under there, but not freely moving in an open channel like it is in the river down the street. When looking underground, we're dealing mostly with something called pore space. Pore space. I almost said spore face. Oh, that would have been a long day. Pore space. This is all the holes, openings, nooks and crannies, gaps and spaces in rocks and sediment. Does this igneous rock have pore space? No. No. It is a mass of tightly interlocking crystals. Now, if I were to smack it with a hammer and cause the formation of a lot of little microscopic fractures and cracks throughout the middle of it, then yes, then it would have pore space. That's odd. Someone took my sandstone. Well, I'll use this dolomite instead. Is this dolomite a sedimentary rock? Does it have pore space? Good grief, you can see it. It's got holes all through it. Yes. In addition to all the holes you can see, there are millions of even smaller holes that you can't. Does the sandstone, look at where did it go? Does the sandstone, another sedimentary rock, does it have pore space? Yes. What is sand? You spent 3 weeks looking at sedimentary rock, right? You guys should be nodding right now. Yes, you did. I know it's probably a blur. I gotta get going. Well, what is sandstone? There we go. Yeah, there you go. What is sandstone made with? It's made of sand. Individual particles of sand, all glued together to form rock. Anyone have those thirsty coasters? Those drink coasters made of little discs of rock? You wonder where the water goes? It goes into the rock. Yeah, I know that. It goes into the rock. Now, I know that's a mind blower to think about, because by the time you're just a little kid, you're taught rock, solid, don't hit sister in the head with it. Right? You learn rock, solid, right? This rock, this solid rock, okay, is 30% to 35% empty airspace, pore space, up to 35%. 35% of this thing is not here. Has air in it, it's air filled. Does this feel like 35% is filled with air? No, it's a rock, but it is. It is. Pore space. Let's look at this really, really close. What's this look like really, really close? Well, we don't have time to sit here and pass around a hand length and everyone can go, oh, wow, okay, yeah, okay, look. So instead of trying to look at something really small, let's look at an analogy of something really, really big. Grains of sand in that sandstone. In most sandstones are round. They have high sphericity, and all the edges and corners are knocked off. So they're like little round beads, little round pellets. But sand, I mean, you've all seen sand. You've been on the beach, right? Little tiny little grains. Have you ever been to Walmart, Meijer, Kmart, Kroger? Especially in the springtime. Not so much now. But in the springtime, when in the toy department, they got those big, huge, wire cocktail onion heaters, my olive heaters, my pickle heaters, anything, brine in a jar heaters. I got a few people there. When you get that jar of olives, are olives the only thing in the jar? No. What else is in there? the pickling liquid for the olives, or the pickles, or the cocktail onions, or the pig's feet, or whatever it is you're getting out of the jar, right? Why? Because the olives are round, and they can only be packed together just so tightly before they're all boiled. And the surfaces where they cannot touch because of their shape, that leaves a gap, it leaves a space. That space is pore space. The smaller the objects, the more space you have in between them where they cannot touch.
That's kind of like when they say they fix you a big jar and put sand, pebbles, all these different types of things in it. And you say, is this jar full? And everybody's like, yes, it's full. And then you dump water in it.
Yeah, because the water being liquid will find all the other spaces in between all the smaller pieces. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can fill that thing with beach balls, and then soccer balls, and then ping pong balls, and tennis balls, and marbles, and then still fill it with water. That'd be hard to do because it's all in a wire basket. But if it were, Tony Kemp's got it at Walmart. I'm going to fill this with water and ping pong balls and what? Any questions? Yes?
So you could consider a beach one then for sure then, right? Because you've got all that sand and then when the water comes in, like the tide and everything, it like evaporates into the sand.
It's not just, it will evaporate into the atmosphere. It will infiltrate or percolate through the sand. Yeah. When it soaks in, that's infiltration. It's filtering into the ground. Yeah. That's it. So, yes to what you said, but you had the wrong term. Any other questions? We can measure. We scientists can measure how much pore space a rock has. We can do that. So you take that sandstone, you put it in a kiln, heat it, dry all the water out of it, and then we can soak it in a known volume of water to see how much of that water can get sucked into the rock. You put a vacuum pump on one end and actually draw the water through. In the oil industry, to test how much pore space is in a rock, they inject it under pressure with liquid latex. And then they dissolve, when that's all set, they dissolve the rock and remove all the rock part, and you're left with just the latex rubber, with the latex going to rub the pore space. It's kind of creepy, but you can actually just see where that pore space was and how much of it there is. So we can measure that. It's usually measured as percent. What percent of the rock is this empty, available open space? The amount of that pore, of course, we name everything, we're scientists, that's called porosity. Porosity. Volume. Amount of pore space. Underground water, that's where you're going to find it. You're going to find it in those spaces. Now there could be all kinds of water underground, and there is. But if the water can't come out of the rock, it's of no use to us. That water's got to be able to move. It has to be able to flow through from one pore space into the next. It's got to be able to move through the rock, move through the ground, or we'd never be able to get it out of the well. It would never get to the surface. Water from the surface could never get back in to keep it full. So those pore spaces have to be interconnected. They have to allow for flow, for movement from one pore space into the next. And we scientists can measure that as well. That's called permeability. Permeability is how easily a fluid can flow through those pore spaces. keeping them on there. There you go. On there. 4. Are all rocks made from the same materials? No. Are all rocks made by the same processes? No. All rocks created equally? No. We have no constitution. So no, they're not. So are all rocks going to have pore space? No. Are all rocks that do have pore space going to have the same amount? No. For those rocks that have porosity, are they all going to have the same permeability? No. Figures. Which means that some rocks are going to be better than others at holding water. So we're going to be looking for certain rocks for that water supply. What we need is called an aquifer. Iferous means containing, full of. Aqua means water. Aquifer translates as water full. Water bearing. It holds water. By definition, an aquifer is going to have to be a rock or a pile of sediment that has specific characteristics. That has high enough porosity and permeability to supply a well. It not only has to be able to hold water in sufficient volume, but it has to be able to allow that volume of water to flow through fast enough to supply your well. For individual household use or municipal use, standard water usage, your general requirements are 5 to 8 gallons per minute. That's how fast the water needs to come out of there to maintain proper water pressure throughout the home, throughout the business, throughout the building. 5 to 8 gallons per minute. That's an aquifer. The same applies to oil and gas. Because if those pore spaces aren't full of water, and they're not full of air, they're going to be full of other liquids. Methane or natural gas or crude oil. They're found in the same place, in the pore space. Now if you have a layer of rock or sediment that's full of oil or gas, well that's not an aquifer. That's a reservoir. So in oil and gas, they can care less about aquifers. They're looking for reservoirs. Rocks that are full of oil and gas. But the same applies. They have to have enough porosity and enough permeability to allow that material to flow through the well so you can pull it out of there. And since oil is a lot thicker than water, then it needs to have even higher permeability. It's harder for it to get through all the pores, and it's sticky. It's sticky, so it'll cling to the insides of the pore space. Any questions? Oh, it is almost time to get the hell out of here, isn't it? Now, not all rocks are created equally. Some are going to be aquifers. Some of them are going to be really darn good aquifers. Others, not so much. Some won't be aquifers at all. Some will be aquicludes. They will exclude the vertical flow of water. They'll trap water. They'll confine water. Prohibit its vertical flow. Others are aquitards. They retard, prohibit, slow down the flow of water. They restrict the permeability. We'll pick up with that on Tuesday after class of 2. If you came in late, make sure you get the attendance sheet.